Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video of myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 8th of November 2025. Sorry I'm a little bit late to it today, but had to attend one of my boys' football matches. The other one didn't have a match today, but yeah, good 5-4 victory for Oscar's team in the D-League. And yeah, Finn's A-League team wasn't playing today, so Oscar scored a brace, scored a couple of goals, and they won 5-4. So happy days, but apologies, I am a little bit delayed. Let's get on with it. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or shared the videos, please certainly subscribe to the channel. That would be a great help indeed. Right, onwards and upwards. We start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, as usual. All the usual caveats apply to these, and you can find them linked in the description below. We have 1,190 personnel lost, so consecutive days, so it's 3 consecutive days now of pretty high numbers in that category. That is good news for the Ukrainian. Very low number of tanks, well, no tanks, and troop carrying AFVs, one of those. 20 artillery systems, so I presume the weather is getting marginally better, back up to the 20 sort of region. 3 multiple launch rocket systems, that's pretty good for that category, taken out in the last 24 hours, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. We have a helicopter taken out as well, a helicopter lost here. I wonder where that has come from, so that's interesting. We know there's a helicopter that was lost. In fact, if I doubt it's going to be this though. So, update: helicopter that crashed in Dagestan belonged to the sanctioned Kizlyar electromechanical plant and carried plant workers to Izbirbash. The plant supplies control, diagnostic, and onboard systems for the Su and MiG warplanes Russia uses against Ukraine. So there was, a Ka-226 helicopter reportedly carrying tourists. Actually, it's not tourists. Crashed at a resort near Izbirbash in Dagestan, Russia. 4 of the 7 passengers are believed to be dead. So that's the only helicopter information I have. So I don't quite know what's going on there with one helicopter, but good news nonetheless. We have 3 multiple launch rocket systems, as mentioned, a single anti-aircraft warfare system, and 72 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is below 100 there, so not nearly as many of those vehicles, considering there are lots of personnel lost as we might otherwise expect. I think that's because much of the many of the losses for the Russians will be in the Pokrovsk area, where there isn't a lot of vehicle use. A lot of troop-led attacks and defenses there. Now, when we talk about personnel losses, the UK Defence Intelligence have released an update saying that Russia has likely lost around 1.14 million soldiers killed and wounded since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February 2022. So this is what they have in terms of the different years. So this one at the bottom, that's 2022. And then we went up to 2023, higher numbers all round. Then we had 2024 is this one. And then interesting that from May onwards of this year, we had the very, very high numbers of Russian losses from earlier in 2025 slip down beneath 2024 numbers. At the moment, creeping back up. Like I said, the last 3 days are interesting that we're seeing that change a little bit. Let's look at the stats from the general staff that Dell has put lovingly together for us, as he does every single day. Props to Dell for doing this. What a useful addition this is, and this is freely available in the description below. We go to the personnel numbers here. We can see what stats here. I'm not going to remove my head. You can get a picture of that. So this purple line here, that trend line, really does show that it is trending back upwards again after coming down from earlier on in the year. The steeper the blue line, the total losses, the heavier the losses. So you have the steepest part of the blue line around this area here. But you can see that it's getting a little bit challenging again for the Russians, but essentially it's been a downward trajectory since earlier this year when it was pretty horrific for Russian losses. Okay, is in a monthly average for January this year, it was 1,556. Absolutely incredible numbers there, and that was end of last year, December and September last year, over 1,500 both of those months as well. So actually the highest month has been December of last year. Right, okay, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in a separate video, but we've lost 27 of our own, says Robert Brovdi Magyar from Magyar's Birds. In return, we've destroyed 24,895 Russian troops and 76,950 targets. That's 2 entire army corps. And for every one of ours, 1,000 of theirs. In other words, he is saying that the ratio of Magyar's Birds dead to Russian dead that the Magyar's Birds have killed, it's 1 to 1,000. That's absolutely incredible. But as I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a separate video, because he's actually released some more text alongside that. Zelensky said in October, Russia suffered the largest losses in a month due to drones. 25,000 deaths confirmed so far. Unconfirmed losses could be another 2 or 3,000. Russia wants to capture Pokrovsk as soon as possible in order to strengthen its narrative, which is exactly what we've been saying, that it's very kind of PR, symbolic, political. I think the functional use of Pokrovsk for either side has long disappeared, although what Ukraine won't want to do is allow Russia to get their hands on the kind of coal, coking resources that can help out, for example, the steel industry and whatnot. Although Ukraine can't use that at the moment, they wouldn't want to allow Russia to be able to use that. Now, here, to go back to Zelensky, he said, Russian forces have mounted 220 attacks on Pokrovsk in 3 days. They've suffered losses on November the 5th and still hold 314 troops there. Zelensky has said that's a rather accurate number of troops they have in Pokrovsk. Ukrainian units advanced in Kupiansk, held Vovchansk and repelled assaults north of Siversk and gained ground in Dobropilya. So Kupiansk has been an area where they have had a little bit more success. But going back to Pokrovsk, we've got a few videos and bits and pieces to say here. So Russians have slowed their push on Pokrovsk, according to War Translated here, and cut back on movements, waiting for reinforcements whilst trying to sneak supplies through the southern outskirts. Ukrainian forces have stopped multiple infiltration attempts into Hrishina by Russians dressed as civilians, reports the 7th Air Assault Corps for the Ukrainians. Their drones are very, very, well, I'm sure both sides' drones are very, very active over Pokrovsk. Ukrainian defenders from the Alpha Special Operations Center of the Security Service of Ukraine have systematically been destroying Russian troops and equipment in Pokrovsk, Donetsk region and its surrounding areas. So lots of videos coming out at the moment of things getting routinely blown up. Tim White says potentially more good news from Kupiansk, that's up in the north, though it's not 100% clear if this is part of what I reported earlier, he says, but President Zelensky has said Ukrainian forces have advanced over a kilometer in that direction. So that's really good news if that is indeed true. We have some loss lists from Jakub Janowski from Oryx. Remember, none of these lists include motorbikes, quads, SUVs, golf buggies, and all the usual unarmored vehicles that particularly the Russians use. The Ukrainians use a lot of them as well. Overview of Ukrainian losses: 7 Ukrainian losses to 33 Russian losses. So that's a good almost 5-to-1 ratio. That has switched around from one of the last ones we saw where the Ukrainians had lost an awful lot more. And that's, I think, indicative of their maneuvers probably in the Dobropilya sector where they've been using a lot more, I presume they've been using a lot more vehicles to clear out the Russians from those sectors up there. Nonetheless, here we have 7 Ukrainian vehicles, a T-80, BMP-1, Novotor mobility vehicle, Kirpi, so Turkish-provided mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle, and then you're down to UGV on the truck. So really not a lot to write home about. The Russians losing A number of tanks, including a T-90M, that's their best tank. Claims that they are making them, but there are various claims as to how many they are making, and quite often I get the feeling that they might be a little bit inaccurate. Really like to know what the definite numbers of new tanks and new infantry fighting vehicles that Russia is able to make, and also what specs they have, whether they are struggling to get hold of some components that mean that they are necessarily downgraded compared to what they could and should be. Then we have a number of BMPs and microwave relay station, diesel power plant and converter, artillery reconnaissance vehicle, in fact, two of those. And what else do we have? Some couple of multiple launch rocket systems and bits of artillery. We've got a 92 N6A engagement radar for the S-400. We're going to look at some more S-400 equipment in a second, and some trucks. So definitely worse losses for the Russian there by a considerable margin. Now, this is what I was going to say. There's a new video every day showing destruction in illegally annexed Crimea, although this one is from apparently a month ago. It is a new video as far as what we've seen. Today, Ukraine's special operations show how they hit another S-400 Triumph air defense system, air defense launcher, and an ammunition depot in Udachny near Simferopol. It happened, as mentioned, about a month ago. So you got the launcher there getting hit, and then another drone indicating that has been hit to the point of, struggling to remain being a launcher. And then this ammunition depot as well. So that's really good news. That is another S-400 component to add to a loss list. So hopefully that'll be seen on Jakub Yanovsky's next list. Then we have another video of just the impact of, not so much the impact, the impact of these fiber optic cables. You can see them glittering all over the fields here, but just a reflection of how many fiber optic connected drones both sides are using on a daily basis. This is just incredible. I mean, it's sad. It's like, the autumnal spider's webs are crisscrossing the fields here, but they are unfortunately not made of silk, but made of plastic. And they are going to be quite a nuisance, I'm sure, going forward for after this war is over. You can see it's not just this field, but that whole field behind, and it is a big field. It's just a real challenge there for the Ukrainians, for environmentally speaking, going forward. Videos come out of Russia attacking journalists and an evacuation team trying to save residents' lives in Konstantinivka, says Tim White. Thank God I'm alive, says the driver in Russian, after a Kremlin killer drone tried to eliminate him and the two guests. It's clear from the video. The van is clearly labeled with humanitarian logos. There is not a hint of anything military, and yet the vehicle and the foreign journalists were clearly targeted in Konstantinivka in the Free Donetsk region. Just an absolute shocker there. Let's just put that on full and see what their experience is. How quick did that happen? Really getting out of the vehicle, hearing the drone, and then bang, straight away. Wow. Very close to being, I would assume, injured in that. Clearly a humanitarian vehicle there, targeted by the Russians. Absolutely shocking. So that was in Konstantinivka. We have a Russian Coast Guard vessel not collapsing, capsizing during repairs here. How many times are events like this happening at the moment? Quite incredible. Anyway, I guess, good news for the Ukrainians. that has happened, but it's not just that one. So that is a collapse on land, a capsize on the land of this vessel. Oops, what a mistake to make it. Look at the people lined up over here. Look at them. Wow, incredible. So that happened, and then we have this. This is in a port somewhere. Something's wrong with Russia. Ships are capsizing one after another, says Max 25, as another ship somewhere in Russia has capsized. Just incredible. And then we have obviously that helicopter I've already talked about in Dagestan going down. That has something to do with the military-industrial complex. I don't think that would be added to the loss list. It's not a military helicopter per se, but nonetheless, I think it's worthy of note. Right, massive attacks last night into Ukraine. Massive Russian overnight strikes that hits Kyiv, Odesa, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Poltava, Mykolaiv. Power infrastructure was targeted, causing blackouts and fires. A woman was killed and dozens injured. Actually, there are some more deaths now. I think Pokrovsk saw 3 deaths. Emergency outages are now in place across several regions. You can see really significant strikes right across northeastern Ukraine, where we normally see, an explosion emoji or whatever you want to call this symbol above, say, Kyiv, above Poltava, above Dnipropetrovsk or whatever. Now we're seeing just multiple explosions very, very close by. So they're packing in these punches to really significant areas of the northeast there. This is a huge attack that's taken place. The analyst says drone attack last night in Ukraine shows a different prioritization. Note the frontline attacks, but that much of what's being targeted appears to be railway infrastructure and supply hubs. Russia's been trying hard to undermine the stability of the army supply lines, and both sides understand the critical nature of the supply chain. Ukraine still has the advantage of shorter lines through that make road supply still an option that Russia struggles with. Logistical resilience is critical. It certainly is in war. I have a feeling that Russia are now just being a little bit more sensible. I honestly think that the first 3 years of the war, Russia didn't really have a grip on what they were needing to achieve, probably because they didn't think the war would last as long as it has lasted. And I'm not sure that there's ever a great clarity of their objectives, to be honest, from their own point of view. Many Russian soldiers have said this in captivity, or you've had these videos coming out of soldiers admitting things in their own barracks and whatnot, saying, I don't really know why we're here, what we're doing. And that's from a tactical sort of point of view. But I'm from an aerial strike point of view, I think that from the first couple of years, they were trying to hit some things strategically, of course, but there appeared to be this sense of just mass attacks on cities, and they've now, I think, started thinking more systematically in terms of, right, how do we cripple Ukraine? The energy infrastructure, we tried that before, but we didn't do a very good job of it. Okay, now maybe we're going to go for particularly gas infrastructure, and we're going to completely wipe that out. We're not really going to give any respite to any given place until it is blown up, and we're just going to systematically go through these different areas around Ukraine and overwhelm them and destroy them. And we're going to take out substations, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and railway logistics. And I just think Russia is doing a much better job from their point of view militarily, a much better job at striking into Ukraine. You can see these very concerted efforts to hit particular things. Ballistic missiles were sent last night, quite a lot of those. In fact, Yuri Ignat says, as the Air Force spokesperson, that Russia has sharply shifted tactics, now focusing massive strikes on Ukraine's energy and gas infrastructure. Quite another terrorist attack on our cities, he said. The enemy wants to leave us without light or heat. Now, that's kind of what they were wanting to do over each winter of this war, but I just think They've not only improved their tactics and their technology in the weapons they're using, particularly the drones, but they are just being a lot more sensible with what they do. Tim White says Ukraine's national gas supply, Naftogaz, confirms another devastating attack on production facilities. One employee was injured in attacks on their plants, and Tim says, I believe it leaves Ukraine unable to produce almost any gas in the near future. I mean, you talk about the impact of sanctions on Russia. You talk about the impact of refineries and striking refineries on their ability to extract, refine, store oil and its resulting products and then sell them. Well, I tell you what, Russia has absolutely eliminated Ukraine's gas industry. Really, it's got to be so difficult for Ukraine in these circumstances. Drone attack has sparked a fire in Kyiv. Russia launches a massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, stated the Kyiv Independent. Russia launched yet another wide-ranging attack on Ukrainian cities overnight on November the 8th, using a combination of drones and missiles to strike targets across the country. Yeah, and as someone says, meanwhile, Trump gives... Yeah, as it says, meanwhile, Trump is dining and golfing this weekend with his sycophantic supporters at Mar-a-Lago while allowing Viktor Orban's Hungary to avoid sanctions when buying Russian oil and gas. Trump is no friend of Ukraine. I mean, if you don't understand that already, you never will. Russia has destroyed an important railway junction between Kyiv and Poltava. Due to the lack of cars and locomotives, the number of routes may decrease, especially in the direction of Kyiv-Poltava and Kyiv-Lubny. So yeah, really significant strikes on railway infrastructure that's taken place. And indeed, if we look at this, that is a railway junction area that has been absolutely shellacked. Now, last night, Tim White was reporting, as he does every night, really worth following him on Blue Sky. He really gives so much time and effort to reporting on the war in Ukraine. Literally nothing left of the gas station bombed by Russia in Kharkiv tonight. Injury count there has increased to 5. So not just these big sort of actual gas refineries and facilities and processing plants, but then petrol stations getting absolutely hammered. 3 airports were closed at one stage last night in Russia. I think some more may have been closed subsequently. So Ukraine was sending things into Russian airspace. Explosions, though, were heard in Kyiv following emergency power outages. Gas, electricity, and transport infrastructure were being targeted. Then Kremenchuk was hit, or there was a Kinzhal aeroballistic missile sent towards Kremenchuk. I think it was shot down, and then they sent another one. Explosions heard in Kharkiv and Dnipro. Maybe air defense. A lot of drones have been shot down in Dnipro area. What else do we have? More explosions heard in Zaporizhia. Emergency power cuts in Dnipropetrovsk region happening in many regions as a preventative measure. If the damage proves small, power will be restored immediately after tonight's missile attack. Gas infrastructure has been hit again in Poltava. 7 people injured in a strike on a high-rise in Dnipro, so on and so forth. Just a lot of attention being given to the Ukrainians last night. Some really wide-scale attacks, as Tim said at this point, at some point in the middle of the night. Mykolaiv has also been hit, reports of a fire there. Meanwhile, still around 50 drones attacking Ukraine, but no further missiles for the moment, and so on and so forth. So a really tough night. In fact, we hear that the stats hadn't come out. Let's see if I can find them now. Here we go. This is Tim White showing us that 415 missiles and drones were intercepted out of 503 total. So that is 88 weapons finding their targets, probably. So of the drones, 458 were fired, 402 were stopped. That's an 88% interception rate, which is pretty good. That's not too shabby as an interception rate. But when you're sending 458, sorry, in, then that is still a significant number of drones that have not been shot down. 56 drones. Wow. So that's a bad night at the office. Then they fired 45 missiles, 7 Kinjal, 25 ballistic, 10 Iskander cruise missiles, and 3 Caliber cruise missiles. Ukraine's air defense say it's only certain it intercepted 9 of the 45 missiles. So there were 26 missile hits, and right now air defense is uncertain about the other 10. The main areas of attack are Kyiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Poltava regions. At least 78 strikes on 25 locations. Really significant attack last night by the Russians. Really, really. Okay. What else do we have? Russia destroyed an important railway junction between Kyiv and Poltava, as mentioned. So there it is, to remind you. So gone for energy infrastructure and railway infrastructure. There were some places, if we're moving on to, no, actually, we'll get onto that in a second. Dnipro was hit pretty badly. There's a residential building that took one hell of a beating. The number of deaths came from there has increased to 3 people. I don't know if you see it from this video image from kind of zoom back to give you a sense, but I think I've got a picture of it. Oh, there you do. It's just quite incredible. Let's get that on a big screen there and just have a look. You know, that, you know, those are people's homes, right? Just in the middle of the night, bang. Just so infuriating. Explosion in Sumy, area bombs there, so on and so forth. Ukrainians hit Ryazan, where locals report a fire near the oil refinery, but we need more details. It could be due to Ukrainian drones, said Tim White some time ago. This is during the night. But a lot of focus on Dnipro. Russia says it successfully repelled a Ukrainian attack, a massive attack in Volgograd, yet 4 areas are without power after a substation was hit there by all accounts. And that's what the governor admits. So could well be a lot more success for the Ukrainians. We just don't know yet. Yeah. Right, so let's go on to Ukrainian hits. Ukrainian drones reportedly hit 2 major substations in Russia overnight. The 500 kilovolt Balashkovskaya node linking the Volga hydroelectric plant to central Russia. That was struck for the 3rd time. The 750 kilovolt Pelozerskaya substation that feeds key industries and cities in the Vologda region. Very good news there for the Ukrainians with regard to hammering the energy infrastructure that the Russians have, but we haven't heard too much about last night's strikes. A Ukrainian drone struck the Stolitomak petrochemical plants in Bashkortostan on the 6th of November. So if you remember, this was a petrochemical plant that was hit in a strike. Then the next day there were claims that it caught fire again. I don't know if it was hit again subsequently, but it certainly appears to have caught fire again. They hadn't quite sorted out the fires that were taking place there. Then it was hit on the 3rd night. So either it's been hit 1, 2, 3 nights in a row, or one night, then a fire broke out again, then it was hit the night after. So this is talking about the night after, igniting a fire at the facility, producing agidol, an aviation fuel additive. The plant manufactures products for Russia's military, including Lonol, aviation fuel, and synthetic polymers. So there you go. So that's Stolitomak again being mentioned. Now, in 2 weeks, 6 Russian refineries have been hit, according to Frontline Analytics. Volgograd Refinery, Kstov, Saratov, Tuapse, and port infrastructure there. Mary L Refinery and Ryazan. So all of them together amount for a significant amount of Russia's energy needs or fuel needs there. So that is, or fuel output, might not necessarily be needs for Russia, they could be exporting it. But the fuel output has been significantly hammered. It has to have been by the Russians over the last few weeks. Quite incredible. Now, Ukraine's long-range capabilities for 2026 are estimated to be over $35 billion worth of manufacturing and kit, according to RBC Ukraine. The entire industry next year could reach $60 billion. Funding covers a maximum of half of the real production potential of the Ukrainian defense industry. Now, speaking about Ukrainian drones and what they're producing, Ukrainian drones can now penetrate a meter of concrete with warheads under 100 kilograms. So 95% of deep strikes already use Ukrainian tech, but they need more. I mean, realistically, the only other thing they're using at the moment is the occasional Storm Shadow. The US could fund Ukraine's production instead of endlessly debating Tomahawks and get better results. Interesting. Although I don't think the US is going to be funding anything; they're just going to be selling stuff to Ukraine. If Trump relents to some degree. Zelensky has appointed Colonel Yuri Cherevashenko, he's on the right here, as the commander of the unmanned air defense system. So a pioneer of Ukraine's first rapid response air defense brigades. Cherevashenko has worked on interceptor drones and will now scale unmanned capabilities across the Air Force. So looking about getting the right people into the right jobs, I assume here, and using transferable skills to achieve as much as they can, in this case, in the context of air defense and unmanned air defenses. So sort of AI, autonomous air defense drones. Moving on to other bits and pieces. In a first of its kind in Ukraine, Russian soldier Dmitry Khrushchev was convicted by a court of executing Ukrainian soldier Vitaly Hodnyuk as he surrendered on a battlefield and sentenced him, the Russian that is, to life imprisonment. We mentioned the case in our FT investigative documentary film below, says Christopher Miller from the Financial Times. So interesting that the war is going on and they're already prosecuting Russians on account of the war crimes that they have committed inside Ukraine. I must mention, says Tim White, that this morning a battalion commander has been arrested in connection with the Russian attack a week ago, which killed 12 personnel and 7 civilians and injured a further 36. So this is a chap that's alleged to have organized an award ceremony in Dnipropetrovsk region, contrary to a ban. So this award ceremony for one of the Marine units led to the death of at least some very competent award-receiving individuals, such as a drone pilot was caught in the blast, unfortunately, as according to their brother, who posted on Facebook. But yeah, this is seen as really embarrassing, and it's interesting that someone has been arrested because this happened. Because we all say, how is this still happening? And it appears that because people still organize it, even though there's a ban, this isn't the fault of some kind of systematic failure, or not intentional systematic failure in the Ukrainian armed forces. These are just people that know the rules and still have an award ceremony in the middle of a village in the middle of the day. What are you doing? You've just got to assume the worst of everyone, and that news will get out, and there are collaborators who want to see the death of Ukrainian soldiers. Right, the analyst says here, Lukoil in deeper trouble as Gunva pulls out. Now, I've already gone through that in yesterday's geopolitical video, but also in my hits and losses yesterday morning. But anyway, just a tiny bit more. The US State Department said it would not approve Gunva as the buyer of Lukoil's overseas assets. It had offered $22 billion, but had a connection to Russia via its previous majority owner. The deal has now collapsed, putting Lukoil in a difficult position that will likely see many of its European and US assets confiscated or nationalized or closed down. And then finally, in the Ulyanovsk region, about 300 construction workers at a nuclear power plant are rioting. I don't know if rioting is the right word here. It could just be protesting. I don't know. They might be rioting. They don't look like it from this image. If that's anything to go by. It could just be protesting over unpaid wages. JSC Institute Energostroy is building a research nuclear power plant in Mitrovgrad, based on a multi-purpose fast neutron reactor, MBIR. Putin previously called MBIR a revolutionary development and stated that an international research center is being created on its basis. But it appears that people are not getting paid, and war is looking out for indicators of the Russian economy, of how things are going from a social point of view as well as from an economic point of view. And if you have a whole bunch of workers protesting over unpaid wages, 300 construction workers, it means, one, these entities are struggling to pay because the economy is screwed, and there are lots of businesses and government agencies who just don't have money. And the other issue here is that you've got discontent in the society. There was some reporting yesterday saying that Putin's biggest fear is, I think Jonathan Fink might have done an interview on this, but his biggest fear is civil war. So he's really afraid of dissent inside Russia, and that's why they cracked down so heavily on any dissent. But if you've got 300 workers moaning that they're not getting paid, they know they're not getting paid, or their families and friends know they're not getting paid. It's on the local news, probably. It is, although they're trying to quash this as a story, it will be out there. People will be seeing that things are not going well for Russia, for the Russian economy. Why are these people not getting paid? What is going on here? Why is all our money going to fund this war in Ukraine that it seems to have nebulous objectives that are not being particularly achieved? You hope that these kinds of events become more and more commonplace. But as I've said before, the Russians have an incredible resilience to hardship. Okay, that's enough from me. I really appreciate your support. Sorry it's been so late today, but it is Saturday. That's what happens. Beautiful day out there. Oh my goodness. So this is the warmest November on record, at least Guy Fawkes night, bonfire night on the 5th of November, warmest November the 5th on record. So, and it is true at the moment. It's warm for November, and it's global warming for you, I assume. But beautiful day watching the football today. Sun was shining, perfectly still, beautiful picture playing on. Oscar, he did well, had a good game. He had that five-year hiatus because his coach couldn't handle him, and now he's matured a bit. He's back, he's playing in the team, and he's solidified himself as one of the most important players on the team. So I'm really super proud of him. I have to wait till next week to see Finn play, but yeah, good day at the football pitch. Let's hope it's going to be a good day in Ukraine in reacting to Russia's overnight shellacking of their most certainly energy infrastructure, but also rail infrastructure. And I wonder if there's any military industrial complex. But that said, it looked like most of the attacks were in the northeast. And I think, as has been mentioned before, they've been going region to region to region, but they're just being very systematic with the destruction of different elements of of both the energy network, but also I think military infrastructure and logistics. So I hope that Ukraine are doing that, but more, and I hope they can continue to do that. And it'd be good if there's some more information that emerged on what Ukraine has achieved overnight, because at the moment only seeing those two substations is really all we hear about. So just seeing if there's anything else that's come out. I don't think that there is anything particularly coming out. Just a lot about the misery and destruction in Dnipro. Maybe a bit positive to end here. Amid the misery and destruction in Dnipro, two little rays of light appeared from the rubble. Claire, the British short-haired cat, and Michelle, the terrier, have been rescued from an apartment block and reunited with their owners. So let's have a bit of animal magic. Oh, look at how sad that cat looks. I'm not a huge cat lover, I have to say, but you know, you can't but feel for that cat there. Oh. Anyway, take care. I'll speak to you soon.